Hello, good evening, and thank you for coming to our parent workshop on Challenge and Challenge at Theale Green School. Just a little bit of kind of housekeeping. Your microphones are set for mute throughout the entire session, and your cameras will also be switched off. This is for security and also because we are recording the session to go on our school website. There will be an opportunity for question and answer, and if you look down towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little tool that says Q&A. And anytime during the session tonight, you can ask any questions linked to teaching and learning and challenge across the school. And we'd be really interested to hear some feedback from you as we're going through. So any comments or questions you've got, please do use that window. Thank you very much to those of you that shared your thoughts on the pre-workshop parent survey. I'll be talking about that a little bit during the start of the session. And towards the end of the session, I'll also come back to information about the post-workshop survey that we will be sharing with you. So, good evening. Most of you, I'm sure, know who I am. My name is Mr. Taplin. I'm Assistant Head Teacher for Teaching and Learning at Theale Green School. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleague who's here tonight.
Hello, good evening. My name is Leslie Parker. I'm Head of MFL, and I'm here tonight to talk about challenge in MFL specifically, and then more generally across the school.
Thank you, Mrs. Parker. So, why are we here tonight? Going back to November, seems like a long time ago of everything that's happened. We sent out a parent survey and we had 125 parents complete this survey. And one of the questions was about children enjoying lesson and feeling challenged in their lessons. And we had a good response, 76% of parents saying that their child was challenged, but there was still this kind of underlying theme that some parents felt that their child wasn't challenged or wasn't being pushed enough within their lessons at Theale Green School. So what we decided as an action from that, which I know has been shared by the head teacher, is to do a small workshop. And that's why we're here today, to kind of talk through what's going on with Challenge, to get a bit of feedback from you as parents in terms of what we can do to support from Challenge. So the pre-workshop survey that most of you have filled in, which is absolutely fantastic. There were some specific questions, and I just want to pick up on these questions because I think they support what we're going to discuss for you tonight. So the first one, how would you rate your understanding of teaching and learning at Theale Green School? 94% of you have little or no understanding, which was kind of music to my ears in some sense because I'd planned the session wanting to share with you all the exciting things that we're doing. But it also said to me, maybe we missed a trick about actually getting this information out. And I'll talk a bit later about how we're going to improve that across the whole of the school in terms of getting a better understanding out there in the community. Whether you've heard of the Rosenstein principles and instructions, interestingly, there were some of you that had heard of this. And that might be because you're from an education background, but still 82% of you tonight hadn't heard of the Rosenstein principles. I'll be able to give you a taster about what these are tonight, and they're really kind of driving forward what we're doing in teaching and learning at Theale Green School. Then asked this question about challenge and whether you think your child is challenged to think hard at Theale Green School. And kind of a mixed response. Some of you saying most of the time, some of you saying sometimes only. And I think that kind of is a true reflection of where we think we are at Theale Green School at the moment. We feel we've put a lot of work and effort into really improving the level of challenge at Theale Green School. But we know we've got more to do. And I think what I'm going to try and show you tonight is the journey that we've been on, where we currently are and where we want to get to, so that you kind of have that understanding about how we're going to push students at Theale Green School, so that if we were to repeat this maybe in a year's time, there'll be more responses saying yes most of the time, or even yes all of the time. And then finally, there was a question about what's important in lessons, and quite a challenging task. I think if I asked teachers to do the question where you had to rank order these activities, I think some teachers would find it quite challenging. But what was interesting is the two things that came out as really strong from the parent survey that you just completed was questioning and differentiation. And again, that was kind of music to my ears because as a school, specifically with questioning, we've done a lot of work with staff developing their understanding and ways that they're questioning, and also about how we can promote challenge in the classroom to support differentiation. So what I'm going to try and provide you tonight is some clarity and some kind of simple guidance about what we're doing at Theale Green School. So the questions I hope you're going to get an answer to by the end of this workshop is, what does challenge actually look like at Theale Green School? If you were to walk into a lesson, what would you see and how would you know that challenge is going on? How are we enabling that challenge to take place? How are we supporting teachers and supporting lessons to enable challenge for every single student at Theale Green School. And also, therefore, what's underpinning that? What is the strategy, the theory, the piece of work that is going on and often missed? And I think that high percentage of you that are unsure about our teaching and learning strategy said that's often missed. And kind of what are the next steps in terms of teaching and learning at Theale Green School? There's also another question in the survey about what does challenge actually mean to you and your child? And I asked you to kind of use your own words. And what I've done is I've gone through that survey and picked out some common themes. I just wanted to share these with you. So things like having active minds, to think differently, to push boundaries, for real deeper learning at school, to extend knowledge, to reach new skills and experience new learning. Challenges regardless of ability. You need effort to master something, to really think hard. Something that really stretches the ability, something that sustains interest and sustains motivation, and something that pushes you outside your comfort zone. So that was your kind of theory about what you thought challenge might mean in the school. And every single one of those, I think if I presented that to every single member of staff at Theale Green School, there'll be no teacher that thinks differently about that. Certainly the ideas about thinking hard and extending and pushing boundaries and thinking differently is part of our practice, is part of the thing that we are trying to push at Theale Green School. This is a piece of student voice that was done just before Christmas. So we spoke, it was me and Mr. Holbrook, who's head of social sciences. We spoke to students across every single year group, and we asked them for the same types of things. What does challenge mean to you? And I just want to talk you through some of these, bearing in mind some of the words that you have chosen. So we have something known as #challenge. It's a feature of a lot of subjects. And it's a task that students are kind of pointed to if they want a bit of challenge. So they have this clear understanding that if they do this #challenge, they know that they're going to be stretched. They know they're going to have to think differently. One student said about having to reduce text or transform things. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. This is about thinking differently. This is about doing something different in your brain to process information. And it's about taking bodies of text and really shrinking it down to the core piece of knowledge that you need, or taking images or body of text and transforming it to something else which makes links in your brain so that you remember it. And it's a really challenging task. Somebody else talked about reducing it, and their actual quotes were, I like the reduce it task because it really makes me think. And you know, in your parent survey, you talked about really things that really make you think is challenging, and the kids are saying the same thing. They have to actually think there. This one here, extra challenges are added, which is given verbally or given as a challenge on the board. And what our students are saying is that they don't want lots of extra tasks just given to them. So they complete something, they have to do something else. They complete something, they have to do something else. They want the challenge as part of their learning. And we're trying to work on embedding that challenge all the time in our lessons so that any type of learner can access that challenge. They haven't just got to complete all the tasks before they get to the challenge. And our learners are starting to see that, which is good. This idea about precision, our students said the challenge is going to have to be really precise, use really strong terminology, or really think carefully about what the examiner might want in a mark scheme. And that was good that some students were able to pick that up. And just to re-emphasize the point that I've just made, students prefer the challenge in the activity rather than an add-on. So how are we actually enabling this through the school? So a couple of years ago, I introduced this to the school, and a lot of staff are now starting to use this. And when Miss Parker talks through her kind of part of the languages curriculum, you'll see how it links to that. But this is a national program. It comes from a Pixel organisation, which is an organisation that works with a lot of outstanding schools and schools that need to improve, and brings them all into one place. So the idea here is that these processes, these tasks that you can see on the board there, are ways that get your brain thinking in a different way. It's a way that you get you really thinking about something and help you remember it in the longer term memory. And you can see there's three categories. You've got the knowledge and understanding, the analysis and application, and the flexibility of thinking. And they get progressively more challenging as you work up. So if you're getting somebody to connect things between lessons, to connect things from maybe a piece of knowledge from a lesson maybe a couple of terms ago to another piece of knowledge they've just learned, and having to make that physical connection, that's a challenging task for students with all the other lessons that they're going to, but it also supports that memory for them to learn things as they move forward. And what we're seeing in school lessons now is more staff are beginning to use these thinking hard processes and talk about them. And I hope that you could probably speak to your child and say, oh, have you done any reducing or transforming or prioritization or categorization, or have you had to criticize anything? If you look at some of those words, they're quite challenging words for some students to understand in the first place. So we're really training them up with that level of challenge. This is the first thing we kind of introduced, this idea about thinking hard. We then thought, right, how do we take this thinking hard and make sure that it's applied to every single learner across the school? And I've been very, very keen on making sure that challenge and aspirations is part of every single day lessons. I don't like putting a lid on a learner. I don't want students to come to Theale Green School and be told, well, that's the limit that you're going to reach. So we talk about lifting the lid, and you can see in the diagram there, you've got this first kind of the blue jar, if you like, with the lid on it. You've got all these bouncing balls in there, nothing can escape because they're self-contained in there. As soon as you lift that lid off, look what happens to the balls. Now imagine that that's students. Students can progress at lots of different speeds. And through effective teaching and learning, we can make sure that we've got learning without limits, that every single learner can aspire to be wherever they want through high quality teaching and learning. So we talk a lot about lifting the lid and thinking hard as our two key things to support challenge across the school. Now, more recently, we have started to really delve into what makes high quality teaching and learning and how does that support challenge. And there's a set of instructions called the Rosenstein Principles of Instructions. Now, these have been developed over a long period of time. But this document was finally published in 2012. And Rosenstein, who published it, has researched a lot about education. And he's based this on cognitive science. He's based it on mastery teaching, so teaching that's always been effective and consistently effective. And he's based it on the quality of outcomes. And he's did a long study across schools and teachers. And he basically found that if you do 10 things effectively in almost every lesson, you're going to get high quality teaching and learning, you're going to get high quality challenge, you're going to get high quality aspirations and progress. Now, there's a lot more information behind that, and there's a link on the website there, and you can obviously watch the video back to get the link. But if you Google Rosenstein Principles, there's loads of research out there. And it's actually quite at the forefront of UK education at the moment. Many schools are trying to develop it and kind of learn alongside Rosenstein. But to just give you an example, one of them is as simple as asking questions. And I'll just go back to the idea about the parent survey, where a lot of you said, well, questioning is the thing that's really going to challenge my child. And it's there. But it's about asking the right questions. And we've done a lot of CPD developments with our teachers to really develop what makes a really good lesson with high quality questioning. So it's about open questions that are challenging. It's about cold calling. And there was a comment from a couple of you on the survey that actually it's important we direct the questions at the student so that they do get that little bit of uncomfortableness in the lesson. So we cold call. We'll expect students to answer questions. We do something known as popcorn questioning, which is where one student may answer something, and then before it comes back to the teacher, another student can develop that answer, or another student can agree with that answer or disagree with that answer. That's challenge, because the students having to think on their feet and really go, well, actually, do I agree with that? Do I disagree with that? Why do I agree or disagree with that? And verbalize an opinion. We get them to think differently. We might ask them to think about it from a different viewpoint. You've said that, but actually, can you think about it in a different way? Is there somebody who might agree or disagree with you? And through that, we're really getting stretched and challenged. Number 4 on the diagram there, the instructions, is about providing models. And we've had a push across departments on using visualizers. So basically cameras that can project up live work so that we can show standards. It's really important if we're aspiring for students to reach the top and we want them to be challenged, we show them high quality work. We say, well, this is what you need to do. This is the kind of benchmark to aspire to. We use correct and perfect, the idea that here's an answer. How can we improve this? What can we do to improve this? And that's really challenging for some students to understand that actually everything can still be pushed forward a little bit more. We use real examples. Many teachers around the school will photocopy examples of children's work in the same year group to kind of provide that benchmark. And we look for a precision. And then finally, something that we've kind of introduced this year and we're kind of working towards, the idea about daily reviews. So we call that at our school space and interleave assessment. And this is the idea that we revisit things regularly. We ask kids to pull that knowledge from a while ago and bring it back into the lesson. And we have something known as do it now activities, DNA activities, which hopefully your kids may have told you about, if not asked them about them. And that's the idea that if we keep recapping things and going back over things in different ways and different forms and making them think hard about it, then their quality of learning is going to improve, and therefore their challenge is going to improve. So both of those things, the idea about thinking hard and lifting the lid and the idea about Rosenstein, are all underpinned in what is our strategy. Our teaching and learning strategy is called Marge. And when I introduced this to staff, I put up this picture of Marge Simpson so they wouldn't forget. We don't want that, that kind of image in there. We want the image of the brain. We want this whole brain learning approach. And you can see there on the slide that Marge has 5 key aspects. It's about motivating students. It's about making students attend to the knowledge. It's about making the learning relative so it relates to them. It's about getting them to generate ideas and thinking hard. And it's getting the idea about evaluation and how do they know what they've done well and how do they know what they need to improve on. And this strategy was adopted because it takes cognitive science. It takes bits of the Rosenstein principle. It takes the idea of lifting the lid and it puts it into a clear framework. But what it also does is it thinks about everything else about the student. The idea that the student has a lot of else going on in their lives. And the idea about motivation is about having engaging lessons when they come in and have something that really sparks their imagination. And it was produced slightly later than Rosenstein. So Arthur Shimuraru, who produced this document, again, based on research and cognitive science, published this in 2018. So again, it's a relatively up-to-date piece of pedagogy for our staff. And in particular for challenge, the G and the E part are the bit that really gets students to think hard. If we're getting students to make things, generate their own ideas, do things in different ways, question them about viewpoints, then they're having to think hard, and we're lifting the lid, and we really are challenging them inside the classroom. So what I'm now going to do is hand over to Mrs. Parker. You've heard kind of all the pedagogy and the practice and the things that we're working on. But what we try to do here is make it really clear about how this works inside a lesson. And hopefully that's what you're going to get from Mrs. Parker. So over to you, Mrs. Parker.
Super, thank you very much. So I thought it would be a good place to start. Thank you, Mr. Taplin. I thought it would be a very good place to start to show you what learning looks like in a particular scheme of learning that we followed this term. So I'm going to talk you through the structure of the Year 8 curriculum this term, what it looks like and how that materialises into challenging lessons that help everybody to make progress. So you can see on the first slide here, this is the overview of the curriculum plan for our Year 8 students. And you can see how the learning is structured. Our overview covers the things that we need to do to prepare for effective learning, the things that we know that students have to achieve, and also what are the things that explore learning in a deeper way? What are the things that take us now onto those levels of challenge that will stretch everybody to reach their full potential? Now, we start at the very beginning, obviously, with any topic with some basic vocabulary. And actually, you might be surprised to know that the first lesson that we started with was breakfast. And these were the new words. And this was the extent, really, of the core teaching for that lesson. And it doesn't look like very many words. But actually, the level of challenge within this can be as great as you want to make it. So, the first thing students are going to do is to look really closely at the spelling of the words. And obviously, in French, that brings its own challenges because of the accents and the words that look like English words that might trip you up. And then to take it a step further, you've got connections between words. So connections between French and English, connections between which are masculine, which are feminine. That leads you on to categorizing, which is, again, a really key skill for languages. And also to think about maybe putting the words into some sort of order of priority. So one of my favorite questions to students is to say, which is the most impressive word on this list? And that really gets you thinking about, about the depth of language and the difficulty of words. And I would say le smoothie is probably the easiest word on the list, perhaps the least impressive thing you want to use in your own writing. Maybe the word confiture is perhaps a little bit more challenging for French speakers even to get right. So, there's a level of challenge there for everybody, even within a very simple thing like a vocabulary introduction. Thank you, Mr. Taplin. And then at the end of that lesson, you know, we've got the vocabulary there learned, and at the end of that lesson, there's an opportunity for students to take that learning deeper. And there's something here that every student can do. So some of the challenges here are about looking up some vocabulary, just actually finding out some facts about different language, things like yaourt de brebis, what does it mean? Go and look it up. That's a fairly simple challenge, but it's a really juicy bit of vocabulary. And similarly, we've got some challenges that are around cultural information, and then some further challenges around deepening vocabulary. So that encourages independent research. It lifts the lid so students can go and find out things that actually other students don't know. And that is quite motivating, actually, to go and find out why some people call it a pain au chocolat, some people call it a chocolatine. And they find that out for themselves. I don't need to tell them, you know, there's a challenge there. And then we get on to the next lesson. So we start the next lesson with a recap, which looks, again, like a fairly simple task. We've got the vocabulary down the left, but actually the challenge within this isn't really about remembering what the words mean. I mean, yes, we are revisiting the vocabulary, but the real challenge here goes into thinking about the real detail of pronunciation. So it re-engages them in a deeper way than just thinking about the meaning of words. And lots of low stakes testing. So this is really a little test at the start of the lesson, but it's low stakes. You know, it doesn't matter if you don't know it, but what it does is it reconnects that learning in your head with what you did in the previous lesson. And equally, the challenge appears on the same slide here as the main task. So what I don't want to do is find anybody looking at this who can do the first task really quickly, then has to move on to something that they perceive to be different, a different slide, a different piece of work. What we've got is a challenge that is visible at the same time as the main task, and again gets those students who need to be challenged thinking about taking that learning a little bit further straight away. And then the end of this lesson, this was an interesting task, actually, because at the end of the lesson, there were 3 challenges and students had to choose one of the challenges. And I played a bit of a canny game here because I put the most difficult challenge first. And I think lots of students will sometimes assume the most difficult thing is at the end. And so there's a bit of psychology here, getting them to think, actually, if I look at number 1 and I think I can do it, I will do it. And again, not just extra work, but different work. So the challenges are all visible to everybody. And, you know, it's not a case of me saying, this is extra for you, do this first, then do something else. So the challenges are sort of structured, they're differentiated, there's support and modeling so that students can achieve these things because it's all to do with the work that's been done in the video. So yeah, it was quite nice to see the results from that particular piece of work. And then one of the things we work really hard on in languages is giving students the tools to learn. So I talked earlier about using vocabulary tricks and, you know, how do we get into remembering things? What do you notice about words that's going to help you remember them? And this is just a little activity that I used with Year 8 to get them to do some independent practice. So they had to make some vocabulary cards, which is great. Flashcards, we've all used them before. But it can't stop there. The task can't be that you're just making the cards. The task is really about how do you use those to challenge yourself and make your learning a bit stronger, and that you become very familiar with what you're doing. So the next step then was to tell them what to do with the cards. And as you can see there, this is all about repetition and about re-engaging with things and perhaps thinking in a different way, checking yourself, getting somebody to work with you. So that was a helpful next step for them. And then finally, there are students who are going to find that particularly easy because they might have a good brain for remembering words. And what do we do for students who find themselves in that position? Well, we give them a bit of independent work that's really going to take that onto the next level. And in fact, I remember saying to them at the time when they did this work, I'm not going to help you with this. you're going to use the third person here of the first person plural of the verbs, and you can find that out for yourselves. And if you were to go back now to the curriculum plan that I showed you at the beginning, you might have just spotted that using the I form of the verb was the achieve section, but actually the challenge section came in using the we form of the verb. So this supports the curriculum plan by enabling those students who need challenge to really stretch for the top. And again, let's think about some of the Marge strategy and some of the thinking hard strategies. So this is a really easy activity for me to construct in languages, but actually it involves an awful lot of hard thinking for the students. So they had done a translation where they found some, they broke down a translation into little blocks, and you can see the example at the top. Those are the blocks that were constructed from the work that they did. But to take that on a little bit further, they can reduce them then to pictures, to emojis, and then the next challenge is to reconstruct the language using just the pictures. So that idea of reducing and reconstructing is actually brilliant for languages because it really supports memory and language generation. Thank you. And then at the very end of the unit, what I've challenged the students to do this week is to create a piece of work that brings together all of their learning. So this is, as you can see, this is a picture of me and my dinner and all of the language that we've learned in this unit. And I think the key thing to remember here is that even when learning has gone well and there's strong knowledge through a topic, you can't underestimate how important it is to model what you want the students to do. So I've modeled what my dinner looks like and what my description of my dinner is. And the challenge here now for the students is to take that model and adapt it and generate some work themselves and to create something that pulls together all of the learning from the whole unit. So that is how the learning has been structured for Year 8 this term, with lots of challenge and lots of actually what look like fairly simple activities, but the depth of thought required is quite surprising. And I think sometimes students don't really realize how hard they're having to work, which is great, isn't it? Now, I thought it might be quite nice for you to put yourselves in the position of a student. And we're going to see if we can get you to do an activity. So one of the things that's been amazing in lockdown is we've all upskilled with lots of sorry, I just need to put my other screen back on. Sorry, everybody. We've managed to upskill with lots of new technologies and lots of fun activities. So if you can just bear with me, because here we are, we're there. Good. So I'm just going to put an activity into the chat window for you. And it's a piece of learning that students have been doing around dessert and breakfast. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to give yourself a name as you join the game. I'll call it a game. It's actually a bit of a test to see how good your French is. And you're going to give yourself a name and try the activity. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. So let's pop that into the chat for you. There you go. That should be appearing for you now. And if you log in and play, let's say play, and enjoy. We'll give you a couple of minutes to complete that.
Okay, Mrs. Parker. Hopefully they've all done a really good job on that. I'm interested to know. I'm sure everyone came along tonight not expecting to have to do any work. So we've kind of put you in the position of the students there with a challenge. And one thing that we've been able to really benefit from in remote learning is being able to access some of these interactive resources. And they do present more of a challenge for some of the students. And you can see some of the activities there that has just been shared for you. Coming back then to the next steps, I've talked you through kind of the fact that we started with the idea about thinking hard, and then we introduced this idea about lifting the lid. And we're now really focusing on Rosenshine and high quality teaching and learning to support thinking hard and lifting the lid. And that's all wrapped up in our one big strategy, which is Marge. So far, our journey has really included strong professional development. the time that I've been assistant head for teaching and learning, it has been about getting that high quality teaching and learning right, and about engaging the teachers in making sure they understand pedagogy, and we engage with research and we engage with what's out there. So we've done that through inset days. We've done that more recently through pre-recorded sessions. We're still having CPD, professional development opportunities for staff, even though we're not able to meet face-to-face. We use something known as Flipgrid, which is a fantastic resource. It's part of a Microsoft Teams resource where staff can film themselves just sharing things that they do about Marge. And in November, I asked every teacher in the school to film one thing that they've done that links directly to Challenge, Lift and the Lid or Marge. And we got some amazing things. And actually within the school, we've got some fantastic practitioners, and it's about really honing that across the school. And I've already shared with you some student voice. About 3 times in normal conditions, about 3 times a year, I do a whole school student voice and book looks where I'll take books in and look at the quality of work, including things like presentation, which has massively improved at Theale in the last 3 or 4 years. But we look at challenge, we look at marking, we look at feedback, we look at what the students are doing to really push themselves and challenge forward. And we ask students those deep questions. We ask them about their learning journeys. We ask them about where they're challenged and why they're challenged and what the teachers are doing that makes them challenged and what we can learn from the students and feedback into staff, which is really important. We do have a program of observations and learning visits. So twice a year, again, in normal conditions, twice a year, every member of teaching staff has an observation where they're given feedback. And one key thing about our observation is about challenge and lifting the lid and what's going on in the lessons for that. So it's always there in the conversations. And leadership team are always walking around the school and popping into lessons. I know that I often go into Mrs. Parker's lessons to see what's going on, and I'll try out a little bit of French quite badly, and the kids will all wave at me as I leave, but I get a feel for what's going on in the lessons. And we have links to primary schools. I visited the year before last Bradfield Primary. I went into some year 6 lessons. I looked at some year 6 work, and there may even be some of you on here tonight whose children, when they're in year 6, I visit them in the class. And that culminated actually right at the beginning of some year 6 coming into year 7, them standing up in front of the whole of the teaching staff and sharing some of their year 6 work and reading it out. What an opportunity, what a challenging position for those students to be in, but also to really celebrate that this is the bench, this is what they've come to Theale Green School with, this is the benchmark, this is what we've got to build on. We know there's still more to do. I know that we haven't cracked everything. The parent survey says that. We've moved challenge forward, but it's not where I want it to be. We need to keep going. We need to keep pushing forward. So I'm still looking to do some more student voice. It was planned for this term. It may well happen maybe in the summer term now, where I'm literally going to be focusing on challenge. I'm going to be speaking to students about challenge. All the questions are going to be around challenge and what challenge is like and where they're seeing challenge and where they're not and how we can support that in the school. I've talked to you about the Rosenstein principles quite quickly and these fundamental things that make good quality teaching and learning. These have gone trust-wide now. So the Alec Trust are building on the Rosenstein principles and building on the work that we're actually doing at Theale in school, which we're really, really proud of. But what that means is we've got a little bit more money behind us. So every single member of the teaching staff is going to be able to do this CPD around Rosenstein, this development around Rosenstein, which is all about all the principles, and there's lots of videos and self-reflection. That's really going to help. We're looking about how we make it clear to kids that there is challenge in the classroom. Sometimes it's not obvious. And how do we make it really clear that this is the thing that you should do if you really want to challenge yourself? It's about embedding the strategy across the school. There are some of you who commented about the fact that it's really good here, but we need to improve it here. And we know that, and we're working on sharing that practice and closing those gaps. So for example, in the science department, they're looking about how they embed the thinking hard strategies and how they offer different abilities, different opportunities and tasks, a bit like Miss Parker showed you with the 3 activities, how we build that into science and from that point of view. And in terms of making everybody aware of what we're doing and the fantastic things we're doing, it's about updating the website. And there's a lot of work going on at the moment about updating the website. And there will be very soon links to the Rosenstein principles and links to the Marge strategy written by me that kind of give that little bit more taste in terms of that, so we improve that communication. Now, I think I'm going to hand back to Mrs. Parker to give you a little bit of update. Yeah, she turned her camera on, so she's ready, which is good. I've given her enough time. So I'm going to hand it back to Mrs. Parker so she can talk you through the activity that you did.
It's like gold dust, this information you've just given me. So yeah, what I get, which you can't see, is I get a breakdown now of how everybody's done. So I can see all the people who've got full marks. You've got 9 people out of 20, 9 out of the whole group of you who've got full marks, which is actually amazing. I'm really chuffed to think that you're so good at French. That's great. But what I can see is that there were 2 questions that caused the most difficulty. Now, as a teacher, that's really helpful stuff, isn't it? Because I know where to focus my revision next lesson. I would know where to start with you if you were coming into my class next time. I would know which students needed a bit of extra help with that. But equally, I would know that you 9 people who got full marks, you possibly don't need to see those words again. Or if you are going to see those words again, what am I going to do with you that is going to challenge you to not sit there and just think I already know that? So that's quite helpful. So just because I know you'll want to know, the 2 words that you found most difficult were une religieuse, which actually is a dessert, and it's a funny little thing. It's 2 shoe buns, one on top of the other, that look a little bit like a nun. So those of you who know a bit of French will have known that une religieuse actually means a nun. And again, that's a bit good hook for the students, because they picture those 2 little chocolate shoe buns with a nice cream collar, and that looks a little bit like a nun. And the other word was un fraisier. And I talked to the students actually this term about how we think that a French strawberry cake is going to be called un gâteau à la fraise or un gâteau aux fraises, but it isn't really. French people have a separate word for it, which is un fraisier, and that also caused you a few problems. So not surprisingly, they were the 2. Actually, I would have said they were the 2 most difficult words. But yeah, that's sort of quite reassuring for me to see, A, some people got full marks, B, some people found it difficult. That's what you'd expect, isn't it, in a mixed ability group like you are? So yeah, well done. I hope you found it fun.
And what we'll do, we'll invite everybody back next week, Mrs. Parker, and we can test to make sure that they've moved forward on that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So thank you very much for sharing that activity and the results. And there's a lot of our teachers currently in remote conditions are using these type of activities. And you may well have seen your child being involved in some of these. So that brings us up towards the end of the workshop in terms of what we want to present to you and talk to you about. It's really frustrating to me. I was saying to Ms. Parker before we started the event that we're not in the hall, because it'd be lovely to be able to have open conversations and chat with you. And I know some of you will be preferring that, but this is the situation that we're in. We have had a few comments and questions come through. We've got about 15 minutes if we need that 15 minutes. If you have got any specific questions about teaching and learning, or anything to do with challenge, or anything in terms of the points that we've raised tonight, I just want to share a couple of things on here. That we have lost one parent who just said, Mrs. Parker, thank you for everything you've done and the work that you're doing for students. So that's a really nice comment. So the first question that has come in, and Ms. Parker, hopefully you can answer this. I think it'd be better for you to answer it than me, is how we are ensuring that teaching staff understand the teaching and learning strategy and how they actually use it. And I think rather than me saying that, I think it'd be better for you to say that. Mrs. Parker, you just need to unmute, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's been one of the biggest and most positive changes in recent years. I mean, you talked about the things that you've introduced, but the willingness of the staff to take on board all the new ideas and implement them through a very thorough and well-considered CPD program. So we've got lots of continuing professional development going on all the time. I mean, we've had 2 sessions this week, for instance, just because we're in lockdown, that hasn't stopped. And actually the collaboration across the staff, the sharing of ideas, somebody said there about sharing ideas with other teachers. That is really the principle of what we're doing. The senior leadership team are incredibly supportive. Mr. Taplin said, he comes into my lessons frequently, and the senior leadership team are around and about and in and supporting, specifically looking at challenge, specifically looking at what we're doing to implement the strategies that we've been working on. Book looks as well. The amount of scrutiny of students' work has increased enormously, but in the most positive way you can imagine, because it's been great to see the improvements there too. So I mean, there's checking. Obviously, there's checking that teachers are doing the right thing, but there's a genuine willingness and a real desire to keep implementing things in the best way possible.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Parker. Another question has come in about students who potentially don't want to access challenge and how we encourage them. So I think if I'll take that question. So the question is, how do we encourage students to kind of go with the challenge? Well, I think the first thing is that, as you are aware, we've invested in our class charts application. And I mean, as a parent, you get to see a very small amount of the data that actually gives us. But what that means at the start of a year is we as teachers have access to our classes through this application, and it indicates for us our more able students, our pupil premium students, our SEND students, and it has a whole host of other information on there. So the first thing we are aware of is who are the students that are considered more able. So we can push them from that point of view. But then as teachers, it's about us knowing our students. And I've worked in 3 other schools, and I hand on heart would say that the teachers at Theale Green School know their students better than I have done in the other schools. And that means that a little nudge, and I don't physically mean going up to the student and obviously nudging them, but a little nudge to the student quietly saying, well, have you had a go at the challenge? Or putting up on the board and saying, well, I think all of you should have a go at this before you do this activity, or actually introducing the challenge at the same time. And if you think about the example that Ms. Parker gave you and saying, well, here's the task, but actually here's the challenge. And by kind of speaking to students and encouraging them to go for that additional challenge. And what we're finding, I think, is that more and more students are going towards that challenge as more students take on board the challenge. And we're not there yet. So we've kind of still got that. And then it's through questioning. You can't really back out of a question, I think, is probably the best way. As teachers, we expect students to respond, and that's rightly so. And students always know something. I kind of have a mantra that says, I don't accept, I don't know, because you do know something. And that culture is starting to grow at Theale Green School. So if you question some student, and then it's about kind of teasing that out through high quality questioning. Sometimes you'll ask a question and you think it's clear in your head, but then the student looks at you as if to say, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And then you've got to rephrase it and kind of push and push and push. And then finally you'll get them kind of from that. So it's a kind of multifaceted approach in terms of how we encourage students to have a go. So hopefully that answers that question. Interesting question about what we do outside of lessons and how we, just bear with me one second, how do we make sure that students aren't just focused on academic skills? Do you want me to take that one, Ms. Parker, or would you like to take that one?
Well, I can start.
Yep.
I think, to be honest, the range of extracurricular stuff that we have in the school is phenomenal. And you're quite right. It shouldn't just be about what we're doing in the classroom in an academic way. And in order to become a well-rounded, well-educated person, you've got to have the balance. So I think as a school, we've done an awful lot of work around getting students involved in clubs and sporting things and all of those things that complement what they're doing. It can't always be about all the sort of academic written stuff, the independent research tasks. The other stuff has a part to play as well. And for some students, that's where their challenge lies. That's the sort of thing that they are going to derive the most satisfaction from, and that we need to be fostering that as much as the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that. We've recently introduced our Theale Green Scholars Programme, and I think it's been retrofit. I'm not quite sure which year groups have probably have access to it yet. But we're kind of thinking along the lines that every child has an ability to do some research in something they enjoy. Now, that could well be a non-academic skill. That could be something about public speaking, or something about drama, or something about dance or music. It doesn't mean that it has to be a project that is what when we hear the word project, we think kind of written style thing, but it doesn't have to be that. And this is a new thing that we're kind of trying to think, well, how can we challenge students outside the lesson? And I think that's kind of what the question's going towards as well. So yes, we've got all these clubs, but also we've got these extra things that are being added on. So thank you very much for that question. Okay, we had another question about feedback. And the question is, how do we ensure that feedback is consistent across the curriculum so that students know they're on track and take on challenge? So again, we've been on the journey in the last 3 years with feedback. When I took over as assistant head teacher, we had a feedback policy where teachers were told they had to mark a certain number of pieces of work within a certain number of pieces, within a certain number of terms. So it's like almost like, well, I've marked a piece of work, tick, I move on. And the problem with that type of feedback is it doesn't actually challenge students. It's not feedback that's going to motivate students. It's not feedback that's worth actually having, because teachers are working towards a tick box exercise. So we've changed that to actually marking that is progressive and marking that is planned. So we are challenging staff, because I think it's change of thinking. We're challenging staff to think carefully about what is the most important piece of work to mark. Because actually, if you mark that piece of work well and strongly, you're going to have a bigger impact on students' progress. You're going to have a bigger impact on challenge. And you're probably going to feel more willing to put more effort into it as a teacher because you planned your marking. We are looking at ways to enhance our marking and feedback. There is a little bit of inconsistency, and we're not quite there yet in terms of how teachers mark across the school. And we're looking at kind of systems and processes for thinking about bringing staff all in line in terms of feedback. We also do have for Key Stage 3 a consistent now feedback after key assessment points, which Student Voice has been really positive about. So for every single subject after key assessments, they have a feedback sheet, which gives them positive stuff, it gives them some actions, it gives them some spelling or literacy if it's appropriate, and it gives them obviously their marks and looks at areas they're not strong on. So that's really helped with challenge, because cognitive science suggests that kids need to know their areas that are strong, and they need to know their areas they need to develop on. So we've got that as well. So hopefully that answers the question on feedback. Mrs. Parker, do you fancy taking this one? How do you manage individual challenge during remote learning?
Oh, yeah. It definitely is harder during remote learning, but I think you saw from some of the stuff that I shared with you that we've got challenge built into the tasks that have been set. The learning that's been set for the students is everything that's been set for all year groups will involve some element of choice. And I suppose that's where the difficulty comes around choice and challenge, because some students will naturally want to go to what they think was the easiest choice. So I talked to you earlier about perhaps how I've managed that with some of my year 8s, is to you sort of trick them into thinking that they're doing what they think is the most difficult thing when it isn't. But honestly, I'm actually very direct with students. The live sessions have been great for that, because when you set a remote lesson, you're quite right. It's sometimes it's in the hands of the students how they approach it and what they choose to do. But actually, through the live contact, what you can do is, when you're setting up the task, say, these are the students I expect to be doing this, or have a quiet word with somebody and say, if you found this easy, you really ought to be doing this time, instead of going back over what you've done before. So I've been very direct, and I'm sure that's what most other teachers have been doing. Fundamentally, that comes down to knowing your students. So we're very lucky, actually, that lockdown has occurred at this time of the year. We're all completely au fait with, what our students can do. I think is one of the real strengths of Theale Green School, the relationships we build with students. I think if we'd had lockdown in the first week of September, it would have been a much greater challenge for us as teachers. But at this stage, we know students well, and we're all more than capable of saying, actually, you need to be doing this. And if you've done it and you found it easy, would you just go back and have another look? Could you tweak it? Could you change this? And as you said, Mr. Taplin, feedback, again, it comes down to knowing how you can push an individual student to take that next step that is a little bit more challenging, a little bit beyond what they think they can do. And that, that all ties in with feedback and directing the students rather than leaving it in their hands.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the next question, which I'll take, is about challenge activities and homework. So the question is, are there challenge activities and homework as well in the classroom? And I think I'll take that from two approaches. So for Key Stage 3, and it depends where your child is in the school at the moment, we looked at homework, I think it was 2 years ago now. And what I was finding across the school is that almost homework was being set because homework had to be set. And that defeated the object of homework. So we moved towards, for Key Stage 3 students, something called a homework menu. And the idea behind that was it was an opportunity for students to do something that they may not be covered in the curriculum area, or for them to really challenge themselves and go above and beyond what they were learning in the classroom. And a lot of the homework menus for the subjects get students to do work in a different style. So they may not have to, for example, write down. They could present it through a video or an audio file, for example. And so that in itself presents the challenge for Key Stage 3. And as a geography teacher, some of the work that we get in from students is unbelievable. We've had some great models made for tornadoes, things that I've never seen before, which means that it's motivated the student and it's really developed them. In terms of Key Stage 4, it gets a little bit more tricky at Key Stage 4 because of course we're talking about exams. And a lot of subjects, Key Stage 4 homework will either be exam practice or revision materials. What a lot of subjects do offer is kind of revision materials, revision guides, revision websites, and there's a lot of things out there that can support students to go above and beyond. We don't really necessarily say that you have to do that, but teachers do encourage students to do that. I mean, how do we ensure that they complete them? That's quite challenging because, you know, we can't access necessarily some of these websites that they're going on. So for Key Stage 4, I think it is about the challenges about completing the exam question, using your revision material, using the revision strategies that are taught through things like PSHE and the tutor time activity to really push them through. And of course, at Key Stage 5, I know we've got some Key Stage 5 parents of students in Key Stage 5 tonight. It's about reading around the subject, and reading material is quite pushed by Dr. Richards. So students should be kind of challenging themselves to really expand their knowledge through accessing reading materials, or watching things on the news and that type of thing. But I think you raised, the parent that raised that, I think raises a valid point about how we maybe get challenge in and explicitly make that clear as we go up to school and homework. So that's certainly something I take away. So appreciate you raising that one today. Okay, we've probably got time for one, maybe two last questions, but we'll do this one first, about behaviour strategies in the classroom. So the question is, what are we doing to ensure that behaviour management is positive, that we're not affecting challenge in the classroom? And again, if I take that one, because it's something that I'm leading on in the school, along with Miss Cartland, who is our assistant head as well. We have just signed up, I say just, but September, but it's kind of paused a bit and we're just restarting up. We've invested in a Future Learn Positive Behaviour Management course. And this is about really recognising how, as adults in the classroom, we have a key role to play in supporting positive behaviour management. And it's about really understanding how small things make a huge impact in the classroom. And what we're seeing is that we've got a rolling programme where staff are doing this, and the staff that have done it have started to tweak very small things in the classroom, which is having a big difference. So, for example, one of the things in the CPD talks about the first 3 seconds of a lesson, and how that first 3 seconds of a lesson can have a huge impact on a student and what's going to happen in that lesson. And you set the tone and the weather for your classroom. And of course, we've got our DNAs and we keep revisiting our DNAs and improving our DNAs. But how do we approach students when they come into the lesson? How do we make sure they're engaged and attending the learning when they come into the lesson? And hand on heart, I can say that the behaviour at Theale Green School is good, and it's improved drastically in the last 4 or 5 years. And that is because we've invested that time in looking at those small things that make a really, really big difference. We've also got our therapeutic thinking room, which is run by a trained therapeutic specialist. And when things do go wrong for students, and they do, every single school has students that find days difficult. There's this room where students can go and kind of resettle before they maybe go back into the classroom. And it's a very small number of students that we have to use that for, but we do have that facility available on site to support that. So hopefully that answers them. Hopefully that answers that question. And the final question, I'm just checking the final question, and I think we could probably answer this between ourselves, Ms. Parker, is how do we support GCSE students in reaching top grades, their challenge to get to the top grades? So would you like to start on that one?
Yeah, I would say, sorry, I can hear a bit of an echo. I would say that actually that's where modelling comes into its own, because you can't suddenly expect a student to achieve high grades if they don't know what the best answers look like. So in terms of languages, you know, I would present some work myself and show students how they can perhaps adapt what I've done. Collaborative working in class, getting the more able students to work together and share ideas, work together, look at each other's work. So when there's good work, we share it as a class. That's another great strategy for helping students to improve, is to model what has been done well by other students. Self-critique, so use of mark schemes, use of exam board feedback, and subject reports for previous exams, and give students access to the things that actually teachers sometimes keep as their own preserve. So there's a wealth of stuff out there that exam boards publish that is very beneficial, and able students are more than capable of interpreting that information as well as teachers. So it's through modeling, it's through showing them what needs to be achieved to get the high grades from an exam board's point of view, and also from a teaching point of view.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'll just echo the fact that we have had a push on as many staff understanding mark schemes and using exam questions in lessons, which at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, that's what the students get their grades in the exam. So it's understanding that. And every year we slightly tweak how we support a year group in terms of intervention sessions. So the year 11, the current year 11 cohort, although now we know that the exam system has changed, but from September to December had an option to attend intervention sessions with their class teachers, which was really supporting the curriculum and really kind of challenging them through that. And kind of every year we tailor that towards the year group and what they actually need. So thank you very much for all the questions and the lovely comments also that came in there. And I really appreciate that. And I'm sure Ms. Parker's seen those as well. Can I just say a huge thank you to Stacey Honor, who's been sat in the background with her camera off. She's from the Activate Learning Trust, and she's supported with the running of the event tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you to Mrs. Parker for coming along and putting you all through your paces with the word rule activity. And thank you from me for everything you've done in advance to complete the survey, for your questions and coming along tonight. I hope you found it useful. I hope that it's answered a lot of the questions that you thought would be covered. And after this session, sometime tomorrow probably, you're going to get an email through with a post-workshop survey. I'd really appreciate you filling that in because it will give me and the rest of the leadership team some feedback into whether you've developed the understanding about teaching and learning, what you got out of the session, and an opportunity to try and ask any questions or comments. So that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much for your time tonight, and I wish you a good rest of the evening. Goodbye.